Welcome to tonight's program, Tracking Down Our Roots, a conversation with Ishmael Reed. I'm Rachel Fetterman, Associate Curator of Modern and Contemporary Drawings at the Morgan Library and Museum, and the Coordinating Curator of the exhibition Betye Saar, Call and Response, which comes to the Morgan from the Los Angeles County Museum of Art. Ishmael Reed is a writer and poet and Professor Emeritus at the University of California, Berkeley. He's the author of over 20 titles, including the acclaimed novel Mumbo Jumbo, as well as essays, plays, and poetry. Awarded a MacArthur Fellowship and the Robert Kirch Lifetime Achievement Award, he is a founder of the Before Columbus Foundation, which promotes multicultural American writing, and PEN Oakland. His 1978 collection of poetry, A Secretary to the Spirits, is illustrated with collages created by Betye Saar. These collages are part of the Morgan's collection and are included in our presentation of Betye Saar, Call and Response, which you can see here on the right. Ishmael, welcome. We're very thrilled to have you join us tonight and to talk a little bit about your collaboration with Betye Saar. So to begin, I thought I would just ask how you and Betye Saar came to meet.
Well, we were part of a movement in the 1960s and 70s to discover resources from folklore and the oral tradition that we could apply to our art. Now, when I was attending the University of Buffalo in New York, I came upon a movement that inspired me very much. We were bound to European mythology and ran into names of gods that weren't presented elsewhere. And this was connected to the Celtic revival, in which writers like W.B. Yeats and others found or retreated or recovered the mythologies of, or indigenous mythologies of Ireland. We saw that as a resistance to British imperialism. So I tried to apply that to my situation, and I went back to folklore. But first, we did a little roundabout route to Egypt. I was a member of a workshop called the Umbra Workshop, which included such black arts pioneers as Skydiving, though he doesn't get very much credit for it, and others who were in the same search for roots. So we began to romanticize Egyptian mythology and mention Egyptian deities, which carried over into my novel, Mumbo Jumbo, and some other works and some poetry. And that was a way of establishing a non-European or to be influenced by a non-European culture. So you'll notice in this Secretary of the Spirits, there are a lot of references to Egyptian mythology. So that's how we began. But then we, as a matter of fact, when I finally visited Egypt and I found that the people who were beheaded on the pyramid walls looked like me. That was really unnerving. So we left this sort of like this fascist civilizations and began to explore our roots, which I began in around 1969 with a novel called Yellowback Radio Broke Down, where I was influenced by Haitian mythology. So Betye Saar, I met her in California, and she was doing some of the same stuff, exploring the past, ancestors. You know, you'll notice that in her work, there are a lot of references to ancestry and, you know, objects associated with the past and Black culture. So, you know, we're doing some of the same stuff. And I think her first, it might've been the first collaboration was when she did the cover of our book, Calafia, 100 Years of California Poetry. And she put if you look at the California seal, it has a Amazon who holds on, who has the Taira or whatever, little cap, and also the griffin. And that comes from a couple of legends, both Gaelic and Spanish, that California is named after a Black Amazon queen. So they whiten that up so she looks French. It's like Blondie and what Dagwood Bumstead or whatever. But there was a big Frenchified thing that was going a wave of that. So they make her look French. And so it was very provocative and daring for Betye Saar to put a black Amazon queen on the cover, and it caused an uproar. So I got a letter from one person who said, librarian, would you believe this, a librarian, who said she objected to the cover because she's a fourth generation Californian and she wanted to keep California spick and span. Can you imagine? And so I said, lady, it's about 3,000 years too late for that, because, you know, you had Native Americans. So anyway, that's how we began to collaborate with that Calafia cover on the anthology called Calafia. And so then we collaborated on A Secretary to the Spirits. And we're the only Americans on this publisher's list. NOK, N-O-K, is African publisher, Nigerian. And we really felt that we were hitting home, or we were making a statement in order for us to be accepted by a Nigerian publisher.
So I thought we could look at some of the collages that Betye Saar made for A Secretary to the Spirits. So here on the cover, you see the title collage, A Secretary to the Spirits, printed in yellow and black here. And this is the collage as it appears in the original. And so you can see that it's actually very colorful, very layered. And, you know, Betye Saar was someone who was always collecting scraps of things and pulling from the things around her. And you can really see that in these collages. So Ishmael, I don't know if you wanted to react to any of these images, or if you wanted to read some of your poetry.
Well, you know, there's a kind of mixing up of things that I did in Yellowback Radio Broke Down. There you have that. We sort of mix up the ancient with the popular. Okay, and you see that here, where you had some, I think that's the Eye of Horus at the top there, which is derived from Egyptian mythology. And then you have, I think that's my portrait there, and a slice of watermelon. So this whole idea of the 60s was to take negative things with negative connotations and turn them upside down. So for example, bad becomes good. I think Hakeem Adabudi wrote something, we are bad people. So bad becomes positive. Aunt Jemima has a machine gun, or as a weapon, instead of, you know, promoting pancakes. And then we have the watermelon as a sacrament, instead of the stereotype that you got in these 19th century cartoons in advertising, where Black people just love watermelon. You know, they're either stealing watermelons or they're stealing chickens. So in 1916, in the film that Burt Williams made, it's all about Black people stealing chickens. So what the idea was to take what the adversaries call what they consider negative and turn it upside down. So you got a hodgepodge here, and then you have Uncle Ben's rice at the bottom and a brick wall. And so in Yellowback Radio Broke Down, I call it a Western, like a shoot 'em up at the OK Corral, only the showdown occurs between two gods, Set and Osiris. So we arranged Set, Osiris, and put them in the context of a Hollywood movie. So that's what we were doing. We're mixing up the ancient with the popular culture, and we got in trouble with the modernists. You know, the modernists, they were reading Russian novels and Hemingway and Faulkner. I say every time I read Faulkner, it's like my eyes are wading through bubblegum. I don't want to say that, but I mean, a lot of clutter. But so the 50s generation was very literary, and you know, we grew up on comic books. Okay, I read a lot of comics. I'd be a millionaire. I never knew that comics were going to be in museums and things. Paintings. I mean, I was saving my comic books. But so we grew up on popular culture. And so that's why we have Ben, who's considered a negative image, and that. So you get a hodgepodge. So I have a poem here called Pocomania, which sort of indicates or shows how African culture becomes like the spice in it, or adds spice to traditional art. So Pocomania, I have a poem called Pocodonia. Pocomania is some kind of festival in Jamaica where African stuff is mixed up with European stuff, and African material is able to absorb stuff all over the hemisphere. For example, in Guadeloupe, they have a Krishna. So African culture can absorb other faiths. Matter of fact, I read recently that Obatala, which is considered an African remnant, is actually Allah, because that's one theory, because the Muslims were wiped out in Brazil. So the African religion carries on Obatala, and they carry on the Haitian Indians. So they're able to absorb different cultures, and so that's the principle that we get, that we can we can be really actually universal. So I think that's what the kind of stuff that we have in common is that we combine the ancient with the popular. Or is
Yeah,
there people in these magazines in New York say high culture and low culture?
yeah, and I think that you can see that here too. So this is Betye Saar's illustration for the poem Pocodonia. And you can see, some of the kind of Egyptian references. Also, she's really interested in cosmology. And so you see a lot of stars and celestial bodies. And then there's this figure down here that you see in some of the other collages. And it's actually, it's from a brand of cigarette wrapping papers that was called Black and White. And so it's this this black saxophone player. It's hard to tell if it's a black saxophone player or someone in blackface. So it's a kind of ambiguous figure, but that you really get that kind of layering.
Well, we consider jazz to be a storytelling, part of storytelling, which was the idea of Mumbo Jumbo, was that when you look at New Orleans jazz, where all these instruments show up at the same time before the solo, we see that as a manifestation of a camouflage of a religion. And you get that throughout the hemisphere. Wherever there's repression, blacks find some other way to express their ideas. And so in Trinidad, you get the steel drums because the actual drums are wiped out. So there's always a improvisation. Even the Muslims, when there were Muslim slaves, but they had to improvise. Instead of praying to Mecca 5 times a day, they prayed 3 times a day or something. We've always had to be improvised because our ideas and our culture has always been, as I said, one step ahead of the law. They're always closing down like jazz stuff, like the Storyville or, 52nd Street. There's always been a repression, and black artists and black musicians and other cultural workers have had to find a way to improvise or find their way around this suppression.
Yeah, I think that really resonates. I think also with the way that Betye Saar is making her work using scraps of found objects and
Absolutely.
and repurposing them, but also it makes me think of the way some self-taught artists from the American South are just making art. It's like an art of making do, where they're just using whatever they have available and using it, and they're making yard shows in their yards and these incredible works that are just completely improvised.
Brilliant, brilliant. I saw an outsider show at the museum in San Francisco, just brilliant stuff.
Yeah, so actually we were talking about music a little bit, so I thought maybe I'd show this one. This is the only illustration of Betye Saar's that actually incorporates the poem into the collage. And so I was wondering if you wanted to say something about this very economical poem called Memo to Stevie Wonder.
Well, I'd probably write that in a different way. I don't want to pick on Stevie Wonder, I think we probably got carried away sometimes with this. He did a song in they had a line called that said, "If you believe in things you don't understand, then you suffer." And I thought that was sort of intolerant because a lot of people believe in things they don't understand, like Donald Trump, or I mean, he's got a cult. But I just put that in there. So I was saying that most Christians don't. most Christians, most Christians don't understand Trinity. I mean, you have to congratulate European Americans for going to places like Buddhism and Hinduism because most Christians in this country don't actually have the principles of Christianity nailed. I mean, they most of them believe in the existence of the devil, but they don't understand some of these other complex, notions. So I want to give Stevie Wonder a break here. And I think I probably take that poem back. But you see the Christian symbol here. There's a Christian symbol here that she includes. And there's a lot about the hand and their camels. This again, I don't recognize, this is the first time I looked at the tune, I don't recognize it, the tune.
Yeah, I had asked Betye Saar once if she was specific in her choice of sheet music, because she uses sheet music in other works of hers, and she said no. But I'm not. I find that sometimes with Saar, she can be a little bit, she's a little bit coy sometimes. I think she kind of wants you to figure things out for yourself. So I still think there's some more research to be done in figuring out if this is a particular piece of music. And this is actually, there's a thumbprint here, and that's actually her thumbprint. So yeah, it's kind of great how she sort of inserts herself. And the palmistry chart is one of the motifs that she uses very often. She's really interested in palmistry.
She also has a drawing here that's probably really a masterpiece, I think. The Return of Julian the Apostate to Rome. That drawing.
Yeah, beautiful.
Excellent. And what I had in mind there again was that Julian the Apostate was the emperor of the West, and he tried to maintain the Greek mysteries, which are very much like African religion, because the Greek mysteries involved possession. And so, and Constantine was in the East, and he was converted to Christianity. Although I found out recently that he kept deifying Apollo, just in case, I guess. I don't know. Get Apollo on the side, And so what Julian protests, I'll talk about barbarian professors or teaching one God. We had a sort of like we favored monotheism. And I apply that to my experience in the Pacific Northwest among the Tlingit Native Americans who who inducted me and Carla Blank, my spouse, into a tribe. You were a wolf, and I was a raven or something. But anyway, was that a raven? I was a raven, yeah. So all of a sudden, first you're with the Yoruba people, and then you're with those people do those beautiful totem poles. And what Julian did was he wrote something called Letter to the Galileans about these Christians who are going around smashing all his art. I got a new book here, which talks about how the Christians, they'd have a hammer, these guys in black, and they go around and smash all this stuff, you see, this character doesn't have a hand. They go around and were smashing all this ancient Greek art because they figured it was pagan. And so he was like a hero, Julian Apostate. And so the poem here is dedicated to her, but I think this piece of art, this work of art that she did is much. I mean, the poem is looks really lame next to this great piece. I mean, I think Betye Saar really carried me a lot in this book. Now that I read it again, I think her art sort of stole the show.
Yeah, and I think what's so. Oh, sorry, Ishmael. Mm-hmm. I was going to say, like, what's so great about Betye Saar's art is that she kind of makes you believe with her materials that you could make things like this too, because they're so ordinary, you know. I mean, you couldn't, you know, because she's completely brilliant. But, you know, she's using Xerox, she's using like marbleized papers that you would find in old books. You know, she's using really common things, but she has a magical way of combining them that just sort of transports you, you know, to another place.
Yeah, well, that was keeping with the, that was like a signal of a popular, I don't know, wait a minute, let's see. Yeah, she comes before Warhol, or before Warhol becomes famous. Or,
No,
no, no, no, he
Warhol
was,
comes first.
comes first.
Yeah.
Before that, you have Marcel Duchamp,
Mhm.
right? The urinal, we all know about that.
Right.
What I found out recently was the invention of a lady. It wasn't his idea. So, you know, my play, I called him one of the biggest con artists in history. And he had a lot of, you know, followers, you know, but I mean, I think she excels because she does use a lot of materials, as you said, a lot of every-made stuff. And I think that's why her art is really so complex, is because she draws from all kind of different places.
Yeah, and so I was wondering, you know, you talked about, so you met Betye Saar, from what I understand, in 1971 at the opening of a Romar Bearden exhibition. And now Betye Saar was living in LA. You were living in Oakland. You still live in Oakland. Um,
I was living in Berkeley.
oh, you were living in Berkeley at the time. And she had a few works in an exhibition at the Oakland Museum, and so that's sort of what brought her up north. So you were talking about sort of the, you know, this exploration that artists were participating in of sort of tracking down your roots. And so I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that period, and, you know, specifically in California, like what was the atmosphere like when you met Betye Saar at this Romar Bearden exhibition? You know, what did it feel like at the time? What was the kind of sensibility at the time?
Well, you know, I think there was less an opportunity to meet artists in California. You have to drive 40 miles to the grocery store, and I think one of the difficulties I had in New York was that it was so dense. I mean, I walk out of my house, see sunrise, somebody, or I go out to get the newspaper, come back at 4 o'clock in the morning. You run it because I mean there were painters and writers. I mean, you know, you see Amiri Baraka walking down the street, or actors. I mean, we used to hang out at this place called Stanley's, which has become very famous. As a matter of fact, a Polish writer has published a book about the Dome and Stanley's. You go in there and be all these actors and painters, and so I mean, you know, it's hard to keep out of trouble. I said if I'd remained in New York, I would have been killed by an overdose of affection, right? So I came to a place that's more working class. I think Oakland reminds me of the cities in the East, like Cleveland and Detroit and Buffalo, where I grew up. But were opportunities. So you could once in a while go to the Oakland Museum and see a show, or you could go to San Francisco. But it's not as, I mean, it's not as rich in opportunities to present art as it is in New York. I got all my plays done there in New York. I mean, try to get something done. I mean, it's, you know, it's, I told Jerry Brown, that if you can make it in Oakland, you can make it anywhere. New York is very easy. I mean, New York at the time was very receptive to the young, gifted, and Black. You know, everybody, you know, you can get your poems done. You can hobnob with famous artists and all that. Those opportunities not here. I prefer it that way, actually. And so when Betye Saar comes to Northern California, it's like the event of the season, you know. Like she'll come over to the African American Museum in San Francisco, and everybody turns out, you know, and to see Betty. And Allison had a show there. And when she comes up here, she visits Mildred Howard, who's an installation artist. So they'll have a party over there, and everybody will show up. So, you know, Betye Saar is really a celebrity here in California.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I was struck when she had her exhibition at MoMA last year, and there was this big piece in the Times, and it was sort of,
Mhm,
Betye Saar is finally having her moment, but she's a really famous artist. It's just that she made the decision, like some artists make, to stay on the West Coast. If she had moved to the East Coast, I think she would have had a different profile. But it's like this conscious decision, I think, that some people make to stay on the West Coast.
mhm. Well, she's a Californian,
Yeah.
and her roots are here. But it's a very talented family. I said that they have surrealism in their DNA. Just just a very talented group of women. Um, yeah, I think that she never stops. She has a lot of energy. She has her critics. They tried to do this divide and conquer thing with her and Carol Walker. They both do different things. I mean, I think I was at the Met, and some tour guide was showing something, and he brought up this so-called feud between Betye Saar and Carol Walker. I don't think there's a feud. I mean, they do different stuff. Although I think, well, I'm not going to say it, but they do that. They always want a thriller in Manila, like Joe Frazier and Muhammad. They want something, like a conflict between two black artists. So yeah, I think she has a different style and probably more tools.
Yeah, and I think that it's interesting when you see how many younger artists today are doing assemblage art. I think you can see what a huge impact Sarah has had on younger artists. On her contemporaries, but also on younger artists.
Mhm.
So it's really amazing to see. Did you want to look at you had mentioned earlier that you might be willing to read us a
Oh,
poem,
sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Secretary to the Spirit. So this is the collage that accompanies the poem called Skydiving.
Yeah, well, yeah, let me find it. Yeah, this is not as mean as some of the other poems in here. I was saying, why are these poems so mean? I know what I was going through. Period. But anyway, let's see. Okay, some of these poems have been set to music. Uh, and let's see. And this particular poem, like Sputin, there's a poem here called Sputin, and that was sung by Bobby Womack, the great rhythm and blues singer, and it was on the charts in Germany. Has lines. Somebody tells me that the Tsar will summon me to save his imperial hide. I wrote this because here's a peasant who's able to finagle his way into the circle of the royal family. So that was okay. Skydiving was set to music by the great Alan Toussaint, and it's on it's on an album or a CD called Conjure One, which was produced by Kip Hanrahan of American Columbia Records. So and Taj Mahal sings it, the great singer Taj Mahal sings it. So I was watching television, and I mentioned Archibald Motley's Chicken Shack in here, the great painting by black painter Archibald Motley. And so I was watching. I started out with "It's a Good Way to Live and a Good Way to Die" from a Frankenheimer video about skydiving. The hero telling why he liked to. The following noon, he leaped, but his parachute wasn't with him. He spread out on the field like scrambled eggs. Life is now always high lifing inside Archibald Motley's Chicken Shack. You and your derby, your honey in her beret, styling before a small vintage car. Like too many of us, I'm a man who never had much use for a real father. And so when I'm heading for a crash, no one will catch me but me. The year is only 5 days old. Already a comet has glittered out its glow, sandbagged by the jealous sun. Happens to the best of us, our brilliance falling off like hair from Berkeley's roving dogs. Even on Rose Bowl Day, an otherwise joyous occasion, a float veered into the crowd. Somebody got bruised over the incident like a love affair on 2nd Avenue. It's a good lesson to us all in these downhill days of a hard-hearted decade jetting through the world, our tails on fire. You can't always count on things opening up to you. Know when to let go, learn how to fall. Now, some critics can say, there he goes again with didacticism. You know, you're not supposed to, you know, in modern literature, you're not supposed to be didactic in sermonizing and preaching, but didacticism is a feature of art all over the world. So that's the poem. And Taj Mahal does a beautiful rendition of it. And Alan Toussaint, who's wrote some great classics in rock and roll, he set it to music.
Yeah, I know you've written some song lyrics also. I guess in addition to having your poems used as song lyrics, you've also written lyrics.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I have. I wanted to plug my new book. It's called Why the Black Hole Sings the Blues. So you can get it from Amazon because it's not going to be reviewed in the United States. There he goes again, huh? So I'm standing in front of Nietzsche's house in the Swiss Alps. So I got a dandy poem about Nietzsche living in his house in there. And now that you mentioned the blues, let's see, what do I got here? Okay, you want me to read a blues out of this?
Sure.
Okay. This is I was communicating with some editors in England, and they kept, you know, delaying in responding to my emails. So I put that experience in this, I made a blues out of it. She hurt me so bad on Christmas Eve, I cried all Christmas Day. She hurt me so bad on Christmas Eve that I cried all Christmas Day. She told me that she'd had enough. I pleaded for her to stay. I'm tired of your lies, your drinking and your fooling around, she said, your downtown yellow whore. I tried to tell her to give me some more time. She said, you promised that before. She hurt me so bad on Christmas Day that I cried all Christmas. She hurt me so bad on Christmas Eve that I cried all Christmas Day. She hurt me so bad on Christmas Eve that I cried all Christmas Day. When I got home at 2 a.m., she told me that she'd had enough. I tried my best to get her to stay. My Christmas is worse than merry. George Dickel can't cheer me up. There's black snow on the driveway, and Santa won't get no soup. No presents under the Christmas tree, no jingle bells and elves. My head feels like a volcano. My head's beginning to swell. When you get a good woman, you take for granted there's so much that they will take. They know the difference between an upright man and a low down dirty skank. So next time you're seeking pleasure and leaving it all over earth, your Christmas dinner will be day-old pizza and you won't get no dessert. I'm trying to get somebody to set that to music now. I just wrote a big piece about the blues for Willie Hurst magazine, the Alta, and those are the themes. You know, it's all about hurt and people, you know, people departing and asking people to come back and all, you know, all that kind of stuff. So I'll try to put it all in there.
I love that. It doesn't even need the music. It sounds musical already. There's a piece in the show that Betye Saar made specifically for this exhibition called Woke Up This Morning, The Blues Was in My Bed. I don't think I have an image of that work. Let me see. It's in the installation. You can kind of see it all the way back there in the corner. It's an old metal cot that she found, and she painted it blue. And there's all these beautiful blue bottles that she's affixed to the top of it. And she's run this blue neon light underneath it, and it's sitting on a bed of coal. It's really amazing. And I think that it relates to this this blues song called "Empty Bed Blues" that was
Yeah,
performed by
yeah,
Bessie Smith in 1928.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Bessie Smith was a great writer.
Yeah, it's really it's such an amazing piece, and it just kind of reminds you about all of the layers in Starr's work, you know, and in your work too. That there's this, and I think that that's also something, you know, that I'm thinking about. There's an expression that you used. What was the expression? Like a
Mhm.
hypertextual or something like that, where this
Yeah,
notion of one thing leading to the next, leading to
free-
the next.
we call it free association in the way
Yeah,
with philosophy. Yeah,
the
yeah,
hypertextual mind, you know, that one thing leads to the next, to the
yeah,
next, to the next. And I find that in your work and also in Starr's work that there's this element of like you can never go far enough. There's always sort of some other layer that you can discover.
absolutely. Yeah, my new novel combines the Christmas novel with the detective novel, with the social, so it goes on and on. It's called the Terrible Fours. It's part of a series beginning with the Terrible Twos that was published in 1982. So that'll be published next year by Baraka Books, which is a Montreal publisher. So yeah, so I'm glad, you know, Betty's an inspiration to all of us. I mean, she's always young. Just I don't know how she does it. She got great genes or something. She's always doing fresh stuff, you know.
Yeah, there's this work in the show, this one over here. It's kind of hard to see. It's called Still Ticking. And it's sort of like a self-portrait, you know, and she's still ticking. And it gives you the sense of, you know, that she keeps on going. I wanted to also just look at this other piece from A Secretary to the Spirits, because this one also incorporates sheet music. And one thing that Betye Saar told me when I was talking to her about these collages was she says that when you're, you know, because what she's doing in so much of her work is she's taking these derogatory images and she's flipping them upside down. And she talks about how when you look at old sheet music, you find a lot of racist images on the covers of sheet music, you know?
Coon songs, coon songs. Yeah, some of the great ones were written by black guys. Coon songs. So yeah, she's right about that. You know, this poem, uh, actually, I wrote it when my youngest daughter was born, but I've always wanted to write a musical about Legs Diamond, you know, or write a book for a musical about Legs Diamond, who was not only a sort of like into organized crime, but he was a tea dancer.
What's a tea dancer?
I mean, you know, they dance with these, you know, they're available to dance with women in the afternoons, you know.
Oh, okay. I was wondering because yeah, this piece is called Tea Dancer Turns 39. I didn't know what a tea dancer was.
Yeah. So Legs Diamond was one of the best. As a matter of fact, there's a movie about Legs Diamond as a tea dancer, but he's also a gangster. And I just thought it's still a good idea. Maybe one day I'll be able to do it.
Yeah,
The idea of a dancing gangster. I mean, it's great.
yeah, and this is just another chance to see all this incredible layering in Saar's work, you know, and again the sort of the ancient and the Renaissance and the contemporary and everything just coming together in this really unexpected but very beautiful way.
Mhm.
When
Yeah,
you
well,
when you saw these collages, were you surprised when you saw the collages? Do you remember what your reaction was?
I thought they were terrific, and I don't know. We had a great party behind this. I mean, in New York, with people from all over Africa were present, and I thought that this was really an honor to have you know, actual Africans appreciate your work. I've been there a few times, and they have very high standards. I've learned the hard way. They have very high standards, and so we were very pleased that this African publisher would accept this work.
So was this the book release party for the book?
Yes, it was. Yeah, it was in New York.
And Starr came out for that?
Yeah,
Oh, that's
yeah.
nice.
I think she did. And what's important is also Joy Harjo attended that party. She came up from New Mexico. I think it was New Mexico, Arizona, and she's now poet laureate of the United States. So, you know, we were publishing Joy Harjo in the 70s. So
Yeah,
I,
that's actually something else I wanted to talk to you a little bit about is your because you're also a publisher, and so you also promote the work of other artists. And so I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that.
well, we have a coalition of artists, painters, musicians, and others. And in 1976, we organized the Before Columbus Foundation. And in 1980, we began the American Book Awards. And we started out at the West Side Community Center. I remember I took all the plaques there and everything. But next year, Joe Paps at the Public Theater sponsored us. And we had Toni Morrison there and the late Donald Barthelme and Hugh Masekela and Howard Sandman Sims, the great hoofer. And it was a great show. And so that helped a lot to push our organization. So we did our 41st American Book Award ceremony recently, 42nd recently. It's going to be on C-SPAN soon in December. But when I came to the West Coast, I discovered that those who determine trends in the East had missed a lot, like just about everything west of the Rockies. I mean, there are Asian American traditions here, and the Hispanic tradition goes back to the 15th century in this country, and a lot was missing. So we saw people who were excellent writers, like Native Americans and others, neglected, and so that's one of the reasons that we began the Before Columbus Foundation and the American Book Awards. And so lots of writers have been able to sustain their shelf lives and been able to acquire tenure and do other things because of recognition from the Before Columbus Foundation. And it's a writer's award. I mean, we don't have very much money, but we're able to get people like Edwidge Danticott and Gloria Naylor and Don DeLillo and Johnny Williams to come to our events at their own expense. Mm. I mean, it's a coveted award. So we're pleased with that. We also have something called Penn Oakland, which the New York Times calls the blue collar pen. I mean, we don't have receptions. We don't have receptions on yachts and stuff, like some of the others. I don't want to get into that. But anyway, this is a working class group. And we're having our award ceremony on December 5th. And one of the recipients will be Omarosa Newman, who wrote that book about the Trump administration, which they tried to censor. As a matter of fact, I think they're suing her. So she gets the censorship award. Previous winners have been Gary Webb, who wrote The Dark Alliance about the Contras, pouring drugs into our neighborhoods. I saw it happen here. I live in a Black neighborhood. I saw it happen. And Kitty Kelly, who did a book on the Bush family. So we have a lot of good writers who are honored by both organizations.
So you mentioned earlier Toni Morrison. I brought up this slide because Toni Morrison in the 1970s was a huge advocate as an editor at Random House for African diasporic literature. And one of the discoveries that I made in installing this exhibition and in researching it was that Betye Saar was looking a lot at this book called The Black Book, which was released in 1974, and it was created under the editorial eye of Toni Morrison. And there's so many relationships between sort of what Betye Saar was doing and what the Black Book was doing. It's this kind of anthology of Black life in America. And so it includes everything from, sheet music to patent applications to derogatory images to newspaper articles. And it's this real kind of collage in itself. It's this kind of collage in a book of Black life. And so I was wondering if that was something that you were familiar with at the time, if you felt like it was there a kind of real movement among Black artists in the 1970s to recognizing their roots?
Yeah, I contributed to that book.
You did? I didn't know that. What was your contribution?
I have a poem in there, and also I was a consultant. I knew Toni Morrison in the 70s when she worked at Random House. I used to have lunch up there with her and my editor, Ann Friedgood. So we were friends. As a matter of fact, right now I'm writing a piece about one of those artists that she discovered, Henry Dumas. We're giving him a posthumous award, and his wife and the executor of his estate, Eugene Redmond, who's a poet laureate of East St. Louis, will be present on the Zoom we're doing. But Henry Dumas was sort of like a tragic figure, and Toni Morrison was one of his early advocates, and he was murdered by a policeman. We still don't get the details of what happened. There were no cameras in those days. I think Toni Morrison said it was a case of mistaken. I used to talk to him on the phone when I lived in Chelsea. Mm. He would call up. We have conversations. He knew Sun Ra. He knew a lot of people. He had a lot of energy, and he put together a lot of work. He was like really what I call Afro-Gothic. I mean, he was like head of what's this thing they have on TV? What is it? Lovecraft. I mean, he was doing that in the 60s. So he was killed, and it was devastating to his family. His two sons committed suicide. So Toni Morrison was the one who really brought him a degree of fame. And then when I did this play that they all hated, not all of them, be careful. The Haunting of Lin-Manuel Miranda. Toni Morrison and her son, Dino, gave us access to their New York apartment. Otherwise, we'd spend a lot of money on hotels. And so she was on her deathbed. I had my last conversation with her. I said, Toni, Jesus is not finished with you. And she said, and I'm not finished with him. And that was the last exchange. But she was a good friend. We hang out together. I see all these people I used to hang out with, and they had street names after them, and dormitories and landmarks. And Lucille Clifton, whose work I brought to the attention of Langston Hughes, they just made her home in Maryland a national whatever landmark, residency for artists. So you get to my age, you see a lot of people you used to party with, and all of a sudden you don't recognize them. Icons. Become icons.
Yeah, I guess it must be a bit surreal to look back and realize that all these experiences you had as a young person would become these important kind of historical.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. And actually, Henry Dumas is one of the poets who's featured in the Black Book, and there's a work in the exhibition that Betye Saar includes one of the quotes that was reproduced in the Black Book by Henry Dumas. And so I think that she's said that she's used the Black Book as a kind of a source book, and you can really see that that there's this kind of dialogue that's happening. And so you really get this, I think that people tend to think about, but because Betye Saar tends to be this, I think you spoke to this a little bit, that, what a single figure can be sort of plucked out and made into, a model artist or, writer, but that she was really part of this broader movement that was happening in the 1960s and 70s with lots of artists and writers and editors really working to kind of get to the roots of African spiritualism and things that you felt had been lost. And I wonder, can you talk a little bit about that, and also about neo-Hoodooism? And then after that, we'll take a couple of questions if there are any questions.
Well, in the Harlem Renaissance, you had people who were like antecedents or ancestors of the movement, like Langston Hughes, who wrote the blues when it was not considered an art form, and Zora Neale Hurston, Mules and Men, and her masterpiece, Tell My Horse, in which she explored religion, Haitian religion, and religion in Jamaica. And Catherine Dunham, who recognized African rights in Black Christian worship. They were all forebearers. And I think what happened in the 1960s is that this, I think you might call it postmodernism, because what you do is you extend the experiments of the previous ages. For example, here he goes. Ralph Ellison, for example, was telling Jason Epstein at the Random House what Monk was doing on the piano. So I played Monk. Okay, I can play Monk on the piano. And then Richard Wright was writing haiku in English, so I write it in Japanese. So what we do is we expand upon the experiments of the past. So you both you use something old and you're using something new. So I think 1960s was a dramatic departure where Black writers studied African languages and Islam, and just broke out of the kind of strictures that the mainstream critics had placed upon them. They really stretched out. And I think this new generation, now I think what we have now is a golden age of Black writing. I see a lot of manuscripts, and it's just a lot of talent. Because we published the magazine Tennessee and I, so I see a lot of manuscripts, and it's no longer confined to the East or New York, but it's all over. Houston, Texas, Atlanta, New Orleans. There's a poet named Kalamu Salam who found 100 Black poets in New Orleans. He did an anthology. So and I think poetry probably is the most democratic of the arts. And we like to get to a point where everybody writes.
I think that's very interesting that you say that, because I think most people consider poetry to be really esoteric and inaccessible.
Because of people like T.S. Eliot said he's a royalist.
But I love that idea that poetry can be this really accessible thing that,
They have something in Japan called the waka, and everybody does it. Cab drivers, people in the royal, the court. So I've seen a lot of manuscripts, and it just shows that talent is common. Because when we were coming up, when I was a kid, I thought you had to be a knight or a nobility to write poetry, because all the textbooks they had like Lord Byron and all that. I said, well, we never. I thought the English people, when I was a kid in grammar school, I thought the English people were so smart they spoke in iambic pentameter. I said, this must be the most brilliant people in the world. People talking meter. It's just, so that's how we saw stuff. It was like not accessible to us, And then there was a real breakthrough in the 1960s.
So what was the breakthrough in the 1960s?
I think the beats helped. I think the beat generation. They showed that just like the artists and the dancers were doing ordinary things, that ordinary speech and the kind of experiences you had, in your personal life was important, and the language was straightforward and rhythmic and exciting. So I got really turned on to Lawrence Ferlinghetti, and came out to North Beach when I was 18, because I wanted to see what was going on with this. I thought North Beach was a beach where you went swimming. I don't know anything. That's very naive. But we became friends. We just did a thing at City Lights last night. But I was turned on by the Coney Island of the Mind and some of the other works, and Bob Kaufman and people like that. So I think they provided a real breakthrough for working class people who thought that you had to be a knight or something to write poetry, or you had to come from Connecticut or something.
Yeah, and then also just that really interesting crossover into the realm of visual art, where you do have a lot of artists who are making assemblage art out of found things, and artists who can't afford materials but are finding that they can use what's around them to make art, and they don't have to,
Well, I think Betty said she was influenced by Simon Rodia.
Yeah.
The thing that down in Los Angeles, where he had, Coke bottles or whatever.
Yeah, the Watts Towers in Los Angeles. That was, she cited that as one of the major influences. She still talks about that as a big influence on her work, even all these years later, that as a little girl, she watched the Watts Towers rise, and that she saw that you could make this monumental work of art out of just things that you find on the street. Thank you so much, Ishmael. I really, really appreciate you joining us, and I'm sure everyone else does too.